Good afternoon. I'm Tensie Whelan. I'm professor and director of NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. And I want to thank again Bloomberg for putting on a terrific sustainability summit. I enjoy it every year and I really enjoy the panelists, and it's an honor to be here. Before I bring up our panelists, I'm going to give you a short summary of the exciting launch that we're doing today around a sustainable apparel framework that will help apparel companies to monetize the return on their sustainability investments. And this is building on ROSI, Return on Sustainability Investment framework that we've designed. The apparel sector, as you know, is dealing with a number of material, environmental, and social challenges, ranging from unfair labor practices to water and climate change issues, as well as challenges related to COVID and to the shift into e commerce. So, as the industry builds back better, it needs to be able to invest in sustainability and understand the impacts of that. With support from HSBC and with engagement from Eileen Fisher, REI, Reformation, and others, we have developed a framework. Oops, now here we go. Sorry, my slide changer thing. We've developed a framework that builds on these mediating factors such as sustainability driving innovation, operational efficiency, risk mitigation, et cetera, and thus better financial performance through first identifying what the key sustainability strategies are. If you can move my slide forward because oops, there we go. There we go. Um, we've identified 8 sustainability strategies through our research and through the engagement with the apparel companies, ranging from reducing chemical impact to investing in circularity and innovation to improving employee and supplier well-being across the entire value chain. Across those 8 strategies, we've also identified 60 practices that we have then figured out how to monetize. And you'll see the next slide shows us, for example, in terms of investing in circularity and innovation, on the left-hand side, you see practices such as invest in circular product take back programs, and across the value chain, different practices, sub-practices that have been put in place. And we now have launched on our website, with the help of our partners, a framework and set of monetization tools that anybody can use to actually monetize these different practices. So at this point, I would like to bring up our panelists. If we can remove the slides, there we go. And I'd like to introduce Eric Fisch, who is National Sector Head of Retail and Apparel, Corporate Banking at HSBC. Matt Thurston, who's Director of Sustainability at REI, and Amy Hall, who is VP of Social Consciousness, I love that title, at Eileen Fisher. Thank you all for being here and all for the terrific work that you've done to date. Eric, I'm going to kick this off with a couple of questions to you. So first, as a corporate banker, how are you supporting apparel companies in advancing their sustainability strategies?
Thanks, Tansi. Thanks for having me with you. This concept of sustainability and ESG is really core to the DNA of HSBC. We recently reaffirmed our commitment to being net carbon neutral by 2030, net financed carbon neutral by 2050. And the way for us to achieve that is not to suddenly drop all of our carbon emitting clients, but rather to find new innovation, new methods of supporting existing and new clients in their move towards a more sustainable future. And that's why we're so excited about this project in particular and the new tool you've developed, because it gives us an opportunity to help companies quantify how these changes impact them. And we've already seen that. We've met with corporate treasurers who've immediately grabbed onto concepts around improvements in transportation and circularity and water use, and in a way that allows them to quantify it and then take that forward internally for decisioning. Historically, there's really been a divide when we've spoken to companies between the objectives of the ESG staff and then the finance staff. And we're hoping that this creates a bridge to help us encourage this behavior in the future.
Terrific. Yeah, I think that just that break between finance and sustainability is really critical. So then how might a focus on sustainability and tracking ROSI, or the return on sustainability investment, really help companies mitigate against disruptive changes in the apparel sector in specific? I know you've seen in your talks some interesting trends.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about trends, really COVID is overarching the entire industry. And so I strongly believe that once we sort of get to a more stable environment with the pandemic, sustainability and ESG is going to be the new overarching theme that impacts everyone. As we look for companies to make really impactful changes, it's going to come through a combination of government regulation, consumer sentiment and behavior, and then financial self-interest. And this tool, ROSI, what it does is it allows us to really attack that last one, to demonstrate and quantify where that financial self-interest aligns with these impacts that we're all trying to achieve. And to once we're able to do that with clients and set those goals based on quantifiable evidence, I think we'll see more investment in it.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. And again, I want to thank HSBC for your leadership on this and your support of our research and work here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, absolutely. Matt, so the focus of our collaboration was on monetizing the benefits of being a purpose-led company, especially as it pertains to how it might improve overall employee well-being. Could you walk us through the results and what implications it's had for REI's management?
It'd be a pleasure to, and thank you for having us. For anyone not familiar with REI, we're an outdoor gear and apparel company. We help people get outside with products and experiences for a wide range of muscle-powered activities. And as a national retailer, our employee base has really been the core of our success over the 82 years of the co-op's history. And for us, 90+% of our employees are engaging with our customers on a day-to-day basis. They're helping people pick the right technical products to get outside. And so when you really think about in this kind of cutthroat retail environment, your ability to attract great talent, to retain them and to grow them is really critical. And our organization has a very sort of values-based mindset as a co-op and how we think about investing in our employees. And we really wanted to use this new ROSI framework as it applied to the retail sector to kind of test those boundaries and understand where particularly investments in our own employee base come at a cost. And is there a return on that? We're making these investments because it's the right thing to do. We really wanted to understand what the business case on the back end might look like. And so we used the ROSI methodology in partnership with the Stern researchers to look at a couple key investments that we make, particularly around paid days off that we give all of our employees to go outdoors and to give back to their communities, and to understand what an ROI behind that might be. So we triangulated data from across our organization, pulling all sorts of data sets from anonymized employee engagement results to data on hiring and retention rates and looking at industry norms. And what we found was that there is a modest but definitely notable return to our organization from creating these benefits, these sustainability-oriented benefits for our employees. And it's on the order of about 5% of our total payroll costs is what we're seeing as probably our return back to our organization.
Thank you so much, Matt. So, what advice might you have for companies regarding how they engage employees through the lens of purpose and sustainability, and also how best to monetize that?
Yeah, well, I mentioned we really started these investments because it's the right thing to do, but we hope that the framework here is one that really encourages more organizations to look into this. What we found was that sustainability related investments in your workforce can be cost neutral, or in our case, even beneficial to the bottom line of the organization. And if you think about what it would look like for the retail sector to scale those practices, it's really a win-win. 10 million people work in retail across the US. So to invest in sustainability related experiences and outcomes for that sector of the economy is something that clearly has a benefit both for the people that are working in that sector, like myself, and also a benefit potentially for the companies working in this space. And we think that that's a really powerful way of analyzing decisions that we haven't necessarily analyzed in that manner previously.
Thank you, Matt. I'd like to stress really for any industry that is investing in sustainability and purpose, understanding the intangible, but then monetizing the intangible benefit of improved retention and productivity as a result of you being a purpose-led sustainable company, I think holds true as we've seen across a variety of different industries and companies. So thank you so much for that, Matt. Amy, your turn. So the focus for our collaboration was on monetizing the benefits of your climate change commitments related to your transportation modes for your products. Can you share with us what you learned from employing the ROSI model and how it might impact decision making moving forward?
Sure. Excuse me. I'm also happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me and for involving EILEEN Fisher. So, we have been tracking our transportation for several years now. Our transportation, the carbon emissions associated with our transportation, and when we started this work with your team, gosh, over a year ago now. The first thing that happened was, just trying to figure out where to get all the data that you needed to put this model together. And so that was a challenge in itself, just kind of understanding where the data lives within the organization, who's responsible. And really was a multiple, team effort. And I would say, though, once we got it all under control and we started to see the results of the calculations that you all were putting together for us, it became evident that not only did Rosie, the tool, provide us with really important data around cost savings of shifting, for example, from air to sea transport or air to truck transport where possible. But it also made us realize that that isn't always the goal, because it depends on how quickly we need to get something to our customers, how quickly we need to turn a product around. So Rosie became a tool for us to make really informed decisions, important decisions. Sometimes we'll choose the more expensive route if it means getting something to our customer faster. So there was this kind of all hands on deck learning, as well as this idea that being well informed is really important to making good decisions, and Rosie really helped us get there.
Thank you. I think an additional point that was so interesting to me is that as you had started to shift somewhat away from air travel, when COVID hit, air prices went up and you were somewhat insulated. You still had to pay more, but you were somewhat insulated from that because you had begun to make that shift to having slightly less air intensive modes, which I thought was interesting in terms of management of risk. Second point, second question, we're also working with you currently on how you might monetize the returns on the investments you're making around the circular economy and circular solutions, which I think is a big issue not only for apparel, but a topic in this entire conference. I'm wondering if you could share with us at a high level the initial results from that work in terms of the types of benefits EILEEN Fisher is seeing, and if you could share with us what specifically you're doing around circularity, so that helps ground it for the audience.
Right. So we've been taking our clothes back, our own EILEEN Fisher clothes back, the gently worn, gently used clothes from our customers for 11 years now, and turning some of that into new product, turning other of it into another kind of product. That we break it down a number of different ways. We don't throw anything out. And so it's this idea of trying to keep our clothes in use for as long as possible and then finding new uses for the old clothes. And it's called EILEEN Fisher Renew. And so the obvious for us, there's an obvious, we take this old clothing back, it becomes the raw materials for a new product. So there's an obvious kind of, profit margin benefit that we can gain from that. And that was something we already knew about. But what Rosie is showing us is looking at the cost of marketing and how our sort of mainline core product marketing efforts combined with those that are being done for the Renew product are benefiting both lines of products. So there's a sort of a halo effect. We bring in new customers through Renew, and some of them then become customers for our EILEEN Fisher product, and vice versa. So there's this idea of of being able to quantify and monetize the new customer acquisition through the Renew product, also marketing costs and the return on investment of the marketing costs, and also this idea of the value of waste in itself, something that many of us might not realize has a value. So um, uh, just turning the old clothes into something new. And I guess, yeah, so it's expanding on bringing in new customers, I guess for me is the main. I just went in a big circle, but we're talking about circular products, so it's perfect.
That's fine.
But that's the value of Rosie for us, is looking at those intangibles and finding monetary value for those.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Well, you all have been, I made everybody swear that they'd be very short and succinct, and you guys have been terrific. So we have lots of good time together to talk about more things. And we're also welcome to any questions from the audience. So basically what we're talking about is that sustainability, as we're seeing through this framework, is really driving that next level of good management, right? It's driving innovation, it's driving operational efficiency, it's driving employee engagement and retention, it's driving new customer loyalty or acquisition. And yet, we don't always monetize this. We have challenges with that because we often have sustainability strategies that are designed in one place, executed in another, and that the CFOs aren't necessarily engaged, as you mentioned earlier, Eric, with basically tracking those returns on the investments and aggregating them. So I'd love to give you each one more quick question, and then I see we have audience questions. Um, so in order to scale up sustainability quickly, I mean, we've got real big challenges. We need investment as soon as possible to help companies move forward. Given your experience generally and with this project, what's your advice to participants on how best to do that, how to get more investment driving scaling up sustainability? Eric, let me ask you.
Sure. Yeah, I would tell my clients to approach it the same way they would any other investment in their business. If it's an investment that's meant to drive revenue, then try to use Rosie to figure out how much revenue that is and whether or not this not only makes sense from a moral perspective, but can actually correlate to increased income, increased revenue. If it's on the cost saving side, then do the same thing. If we're able to bridge that gap where we can show a company that it makes sense just the same as investing in a new plant or a new marketing strategy, then I think we'll get a lot of companies to convert to it on top of the fact that they already want to participate. But this provides them with a financial incentive to do it on top of that.
Great. Thank you. Amy, how about you?
So a lot of people think the sustainability happens in one little part of the company over here, like the sustainability team. But I think what's really important to recognize is the role that every single person in the company plays, both in terms of making the actual change happen, but also in terms of providing the data and the metrics and owning that for themselves. And so it's really a team effort across the board. Everybody has to recognize their part in this big picture, this big effort that we're calling sustainability. And it is only through everybody's participation that we can move this work forward.
Thank you. And indeed, what we see is that oftentimes the data is there, but nobody is currently collecting it and bringing it together. And this requires a new approach to that, to tracking and collecting that data. Matt, how about you? And then I have a question for you from the audience.
Sure. Well, and I'll build on that point. Maybe a couple dots. The first is that the Rosie methodology really encouraged us to bring an additional lens to how we think about parts of our business where traditionally we haven't necessarily sought to quantify it. And again, we're making decisions in many instances because it's rooted in our values and what we believe as a co-op and as an employer is best for our organization. But to be able to understand not just the costs associated with that, which we do measure, but also the potential benefits that we derive from some of these choices was really powerful. And it going through this process and working on this research with the NYU Stern team really caused us to look at data sets in ways that we had not looked at before. So, the power of continuing to dig into parts of your business that maybe historically you haven't necessarily tried to quantify both costs and returns. I think that that's also true at an industry level for apparel and for footwear. this is an incredibly fiercely competitive sector of the economy. And, organizations have done a really good job of honing their business acumen. On the sustainability side, the industry has also, I think, done a really impressive job of creating standard tools and metrics for how to measure sustainability impacts, both social, environmental, and at different points in our supply chain, into the finished product, and even the sustainability of brands and retailers themselves. That work, though, has often occurred separately from that robust financial lens that we like to bring to decisions about whether to open new stores or expand or what have you. And what this finally does is this pulls together a framework that allows you to map all of the different sustainability interventions available in this sector, and then to actually go and do the quantification to understand how choices that you're making as a business have positive or negative returns. And again, you're going to make some of these choices regardless because it's the right thing to do, but to understand what that full business case looks like is really powerful. And so that's something that this has really unlocked for us.
Thank you. And indeed, one of the things that we're seeing is that, as companies understand the full portfolio of return on the different strategies that they're putting in place, some of those actually cost more. Some of them actually save money or create new revenues. When they look at the whole thing together, it helps them make a better argument for where and how they need to invest more. Specifically, Matt, there's a question for you around the the work that you did to analyze the financial returns of your purpose-led program, and they want to understand what were the specific drivers. How did you arrive at the numbers? If you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we started with the hypothesis that REI has highly engaged employees, and that could have a positive return. And what we were really testing within that was, are our investments in sustainability related initiatives leading to the higher levels of engagement, and are the higher levels of engagement leading to higher levels of retention and performance? And so we actually started that analysis by taking a look at our employee engagement survey results. So we survey all of our employees 4 times a year, and we get an anonymized roll-up of what that looks like. And we look at a whole number of different endpoints in there. But what we started doing is we started pulling out the ones that are really related, the endpoints related to our values and our connection to sustainability, and understanding if employees who generally believe that the co-op is really investing in the future of life outdoors and really investing in its employees and their ability to live that lifestyle, does that correlate with an overall higher level of engagement? And not surprisingly, the answer is yes, but we hadn't actually gone and done the robust statistical analysis to prove that out before. So once we had that, we then took that information and looked at how does REI's employee base as a retailer, again, 90% of our employees work on the retail side of the business, how does that translate in terms of ability to attract and retain talent, and then just overall performance? And for that, what we did is we benchmarked our internal metrics from our HR team against industry level metrics, looking across apparel and footwear. And we found that there's actually a pretty substantial difference there. And so you're able to basically take this thread through and begin to appreciate that our values-based investments creating a higher level of engagement, which in return is creating a higher level of retention and performance among our employee base. So all of that information, for those who are interested in kind of digging into the details, is available in a case study that the NYU team will be publishing. And Tansi, you may have some additional details about that, as well as how to find the ROSI tool.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. So you can access this information on Center for Sustainable Business Return on Sustainable Investment, or ROSI, ROSI. For short, CSB ROSI, you'll find online. And we also are identifying studies. We're creating a ROSI repository, as we call it, that will have these types of assumptions so that you can understand, for example, what is the typical turnover rate for a particular industry. So you can then look at your own turnover rate and understand what the difference is. And then, as Matt laid out, make sure that you understand the correlation with what you're doing with your employees. So you have good questionnaires to understand how important purpose and sustainability is, but then you can really look at the differences in retention versus for you versus a company that doesn't have that kind of purpose, as well as productivity. And that's very relevant. Once you've got there, you can relatively easily monetize it because you know how much it costs you to replace somebody. You can analyze how many people you would have lost had you not put that in place against that particular data point, et cetera. So it's pretty basic once you've got that sort of framework, though. So what we find from companies on this particular, and I'm harping on this topic because it's true for all companies as they're looking for talent, is that they don't adequately track on the employee side the understand sort of the engagement piece of this. And so you really need that data in order to make these extrapolations. So as we finish up here, I just want to quickly summarize by saying what we see today in the field of sustainability is people managing for and reporting material ESG issues and reporting and managing for financial issues and not bringing the two together. And what we see from investors currently, for the most part, is that they're asking for those two things separately. But we're seeing increasing interest in understanding the decision-making impacts or impacts for decision-making of understanding the financial returns on sustainability investment to use not only for looking backward, but also for looking forward to make decisions about how do you deal with the material issues for your industry, where do you invest, and how do you best make that argument both for your investors, your board, and for your employees.